Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's get week 17 and the third series of today's Tolkien Times started with Mailbag Monday. Now, Seth writes in simply wanting to know more about the Dagor Dagorath. So let's take a look at this battle of all battles. For that is what its name means. Dagor meaning battle, like Dagor Bragollach, the Battle of Sudden Flame, or Dagor Nuin Gileath, the Battle Under Stars. The ath suffix is just a collective plural, so battle of all battles. Now, this is another example of one of those Tolkien names that everybody seems to be aware of, even though it's only mentioned once, sort of like Tar Myron or King Excellent for one of Sauron's names. Do any of you actually know where Dagor Dagorath is named as such? Well, the answer is it's in the chapter on the Astari in Unfinished Tales. Now there, Tolkien is explaining one of the potential origins of Gandalf, and he explains, "It is said that in later days, when again a shadow of evil arose in the kingdom, it was believed by many of the faithful of that time that Gandalf was the last appearance of Manwë himself before his final withdrawal to the watchtower of Taniquetil. That Gandalf said that his name in the West had been Olorin was, according to this belief, the adoption of an incognito, a mere by-name. I do not, of course, know the truth of the matter, and if I did, it would be a mistake to be more explicit than Gandalf was. But I think it was not so. Manwë will not descend from the mountain until the Dagor Dagorath, and the coming of the end when Melkor returns." Now, in a footnote to that section, Christopher adds that this is a reference to the second prophecy of Mandos, which does not appear in the Silmarillion, and then says he won't even try to explain it here because it would require some account of the history of the mythology in relation to the published version. Well, yeah, there's no doubt about that. You see, when putting together the Silmarillion, Christopher intentionally omitted the second prophecy of Mandos, believing that this passage his father wrote precluded its inclusion. "If any change shall come, and the marring of Arda be amended, Manwë and Varda may know, but they have not revealed it, and it is not declared in the dooms of Mandos." But Tolkien himself seems to have held this thought a bit more closely, even referencing it in famous letter number 131 to Milton Waldman, where he says, "This legendarium ends with a vision of the end of the world, its breaking and remaking, and the recovery of the Silmarils and the light before the sun, after a final battle which owes, I suppose, more to the Norse version of Ragnarok than to anything else, though it is not much like it." Now, there are also hints of it, though it's not called that, in the text of the Silmarillion, where it is instead referred to as the last battle. In Of Aule and Yavanna, we read that the dwarves believe that Aule declared to their fathers of old that Ilúvatar will hallow them and give them a place among the children in the end. Then their part shall be to serve Aule and to aid him in the remaking of Arda after the last battle. Then we go to Of the Coming of the Elves and the Captivity of Melkor, where we read, "Many other of the ancient stars she gathered together," this is Varda, "and set as signs in the heavens of Arda." And then there's a list of stars, and at the end of that list is Manel-Makar with his shining belt that forebodes the last battle that shall be at the end of days. And then finally, in the Akallabeth and the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad idea to attack Valinor, we read, "But Ar-Pharazôn the king and the mortal warriors that had set foot upon the land of Aman were buried under falling hills. There it is said that they lie imprisoned in the caves of the forgotten until the last battle and the day of doom." So there are those three references to the last battle. Now, if there was to be a last battle, what would it have looked like? What did Tolkien write about the second prophecy of Mandos? Now, in the earliest Silmarillion, which is also known as the Sketch of the Mythology, which was written all the way back in 1926, Tolkien wrote, "When the world is much older and the gods weary, Morgoth will come back through the door, and the last battle of all will be fought. Fionwë, who we now know better as Eönwë, banner-bearer and herald of Manwë and the greatest of arms in Arda, will fight Morgoth on the plain of Valinor, and the spirit of Túrin shall be beside him. It shall be Túrin who with his black sword will slay Morgoth, and thus the children of Húrin shall be avenged. In those days the Silmarils shall be recovered from sea and earth and air, and Maedhros, who would later be Maedhros, shall break them and Belauren, who is actually Yavanna Kementari, with their fire rekindle the two trees, and the great light shall come forth again, and the mountains of Valinor shall be leveled, so that it goes out over the world, and gods and elves and men shall grow young again, and all their dead awake. Now you can read this version of it in The Shaping of Middle-earth, Volume 4 of the History of Middle-earth. Now there's another early version of the story in that same volume called The Quenta. It includes a similar tale, naming it A Prophecy of Mandos. Significant differences include the destruction of the sun and moon by Morgoth, and the inclusion of Tulkas as the main foe of Melkor, Fionwë, Eönwë on one side, and Túrin on the other. Now, the last version of the prophecy is in the later Quenta Silmarillion, written in 1958. This can be found in The War of the Jewels, which is the History of Middle-earth, Volume 11. Thus spake Mandos in prophecy, when the gods sat in judgment in Valinor, and the rumor of his words was whispered among all the elves of the west. When the world is old and the powers grow weary, then Morgoth, seeing that the guard sleepeth, shall come back through the door of night out of the timeless void, and destroy the sun and moon. But Eärendil shall descend upon him as a white and searing flame, and drive him from the airs. Then shall the last battle be gathered on the fields of Valinor. In that day Tulkas shall strive with Morgoth, and on his right hand shall be Eönwë, and on his left Túrin Turambar, son of Húrin, returning from the doom of men at the ending of the world. And the black sword of Túrin shall deal unto Morgoth his death and final end, and so shall the children of Húrin and all men be avenged. Thereafter shall earth be broken and remade, and the Silmarils shall be recovered out of air and earth and sea. For Eärendil shall descend and surrender that flame which he hath had in keeping. Then Feanor shall take the three jewels, and he will break them, and with their fire Yavanna will rekindle the two trees, and a great light shall come forth, and the mountains of Valinor shall be leveled, so that the light shall go out over all the world. And that's the last battle. That's the end, the Dagor Dagorath. And it's also the end for Mailbag Monday. Now, if you have a question you'd like me to answer, please email it to bartleman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Let him know it's for today's Tolkien Times, and I'll get to it just as soon as I can. In the meantime, please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, a bonus weekly episode, and a whole lot more. And finally, join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Tolkien Tuesday, as we learn more about the professor himself. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Please follow or subscribe on your podcast apps, and follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.